Listen-only mode.
Good afternoon and welcome to today's webinar. I'm Chloe Rigby, editor of InternetRetailing.net, and I'd like to welcome you to today's webinar, How Retailers are Successfully Expanding into Online Marketplaces. Over the next hour, we'll be hearing from Kieran Bollard, Managing Director at Kooomo, who is joined by Jim Bailey, Founder and CEO of Jetstream Online, as they consider together the growing role of marketplaces in retail. Kieran has 20 years' experience growing and developing internationally focused online media and digital commerce businesses at senior management level, both as an entrepreneur and also in a corporate environment. For the past 18 months, he's been MD of Kooomo, an e-commerce platform used by brands across the globe and named in the Gartner Magic Quadrant for Digital Commerce 2017. Jim Bailey is founder and CEO of Jetstream Online, a hybrid technology operator that specializes in using category-driven marketplaces to bring global brands to new markets, particularly in Southeast Asia, China, and India. At the end of today's webinar, we'll move into a Q&A session. So ahead of that, let me explain how to ask any questions you may have. On the control panel on your screen, you'll see a chat box. Write your question in that box and press send. We'll aim to get to as many questions as we can today, but if we don't get to yours, we will follow up offline. The session is recorded, so I'd remind you that after the webinar finishes, we'll be sending out an email with a link so you can watch it again whenever it's convenient for you. So, without further ado, it's my pleasure to introduce our first speaker today, Kieran Bollard, Managing Director at Kooomo. Kieran, welcome to the webinar.
Thanks, Chloe. Good afternoon, everybody. So we'll talk through. I'll just click to the next slide. Actually, put up the agenda. So the objective of this session really is to try and have it as an informal session as possible and to address any questions that you have at the end. Both myself and then Jim will jump into the second part of the presentation, which is addressing how we can help take retailers and brands into China. How do category-driven marketplaces work versus pure play marketplaces? And then we'll get into the Q&A session at the end. And we're happy to take questions offline through email as well and support any more detailed questions by an email response. So first of all, I'm CEO of Kooomo, so I just thought I'd give you a quick introduction on who we are so you have some idea of who the company is. So Kooomo is a cloud commerce platform, entered the Magic Quadrant, the Gartner Magic Quadrant in 2017, and previously in the Cool Vendor in 2016. We've been working with brands and retailers for the last 17 years, really across two different businesses. The Zero Grey business, which is the managed service business, where we work with brands like Havaianas to do all elements of digital commerce, from managing their warehousing to logistics to customer care, actually the store management as well. So that's the Zero Grey business, which is part of the Kooomo business. And then we've got the Kooomo Cloud Software Platform, which supports the full digital commerce journey for a brand or retailer, incorporating marketplaces as a sales channel that we manage within the platform. We're based, our headquarters in Dublin, as you can probably hear from the accent. So we're headquartered in Dublin with offices all over the world, with a big focus on the UK. We've about 350 to 400 international customers. Some recent customers that we've signed, you can see there. We just announced. Perhaps I think there's somebody. Maybe if somebody could put on mute there, I think there's a bit of background noise. But yeah, we just recently announced the deal with Morrison's Nutmeg, where we'll be taking Morrison's clothing brand Nutmeg online through a click and collect project across 500 stores in the UK. So that's one of the more recent projects that we've just announced in the market. But you'll see we've many different customers. Our heritage has been in fashion. So you can see everybody from Havaianas through to CP Company, Blower is another brand. And then we started to diversify into many different other brands and verticals, such as luxury chocolates with Butlers, luxury perfume, and many other verticals as well. In terms of what Kooomo offer, we have the full stack of technology in the cloud, and we also incorporate all sales channels, whether it's Google Shopping or eBay and Amazon, or it's your store, retail store through omnichannel. all sales channels are managed through the order management system within the Kooomo platform. And we have all the elements of the digital commerce solution, from a warehouse management system, content management system, marketplace integration, order fulfillment, and we also have third-party one-click integrations, which help to future-proof the digital commerce solution, incorporating all the payment gateways, the logistics partners, and customer intelligence, and many other different technologies. So there's just an example of some of the integration partners. So how it works is, if you come on board as a brand or retailer, you have access to all of these different customer intelligence technologies and partners, logistics partners, payment gateways. We've just recently done an integration with Stripe, which gives you access to all the latest payment gateways as well. So you get access to that automatically within the Kooomo platform. We upgrade the Kooomo platform every 3 weeks, so that gives you automatic access to that as we're in the cloud. So enough about Kooomo, and any questions, we can take some questions at the end if you have any specific questions about the platform or the company. So just talking a bit about the rise and continued rise and explosion of some of the online marketplaces. So I'm sure most people are aware there's about 1 billion people who are active buyers on the top 4 marketplaces. We're all familiar with eBay and Amazon, and then we'll get into a bit about Alibaba and Etsy as well. Interestingly enough, where the markets like China, which Jim will discuss later on, most transactions are happening through the marketplaces, whether they're pure play marketplaces or category driven marketplaces. In more mature markets, or you could say a different way of looking at the market would be, let's say, the UK and the US market, which, it's about 40% of digital sales are happening through marketplaces, and the rest is happening through e-shops and other sales channels. But it's evident from the size of the sales there, from 136 billion Amazon sales in 2016. So how do we take advantage of this, and what are the considerations? I think the first thing to look at is, what is the difference between the different marketplaces out there? So how does eBay and Amazon stack up against what is called the category-driven marketplaces? So eBay and Amazon, Alibaba, JD, Tmall.com, all those are what we call pure play marketplaces. And so huge audiences, but there is a higher cost of entry. And with the pure play marketplaces, they take a reasonable percentage of sales as well. And so pure play marketplaces can work for a lot of brands, but for some brands who are on very tight margins, they can't afford to give away that percentage to eBay and Amazon. And so there are many other ways that you can use eBay and Amazon, for example, for stockpiling. And if you're a low margin brand at the end of a fashion season, for example, where you just need to get rid of stock. And so there are many different ways of using those marketplaces outside of your premium product. Category-driven marketplaces are very interesting. There's a lot of growth happening in category-driven marketplaces. There's a lower cost of entry, and it's easier to get live on category-driven marketplaces. And there's a smaller percentage typically taken by those marketplaces to facilitate selling your products and solutions on those marketplaces. They include brands like Farfetch, who I'm sure a lot of people have heard, Stylerama, Seiko as well. And just to give you an idea of what these the rise of category-driven marketplaces, you'll see on this next slide examples by category of the number of category-driven marketplaces that are out there. So you can see, everything from food category-driven marketplaces to one of the rising kind of market share in health and wellness. It's a huge category that's growing online, to construction logistics, right? So there's a huge broad spectrum of category-driven marketplaces that pretty much cater for most products and services that people are selling online now. And I'm not sure, certainly when I talk to a lot of our customers, they're not necessarily aware of these marketplaces. And a lot of the questions I would get would be, okay, well, if I make a decision to go on, one of these category driven marketplaces, how many do I need to be on to get scale? And what I would say is that when you're dipping your toe in the water with marketplaces, I think it's a very good start to try with category driven marketplaces to understand how those KPIs work with those marketplaces. There's many KPIs that you need to hit in order for you to be successful on marketplaces. And so I think it's a good entry level for customers who are, for brands and retailers who are looking to dip their toe in the water with marketplaces. Also for brands who are luxury brands and who are very careful and sensitive to price elasticity, category driven marketplaces can be a better place to sell a premium product to a target niche audience. But clearly, you don't have the big catchment area that you have of 1 billion users on the other pure play marketplaces. So, why should brands use online marketplaces to sell, or should they, right? It's the question. Clearly, it's evident from the numbers. There's huge advantages to be had in terms of sales, but also for brands who are looking to expand internationally and get their brand presence known and brand penetration and building brand equity. It can be a great way and a great tool to expose your brand to a significant audience, and still control pricing and still control margin. And I'll talk through some of the practical ways some of our customers are using marketplaces as a sale channel to do that without hemorrhaging their core pricing through their eShop. Stuff like stockpiling at the end of a season is a good example of that. So let's get into that in a bit more detail now. So just taking a look at what's happening between Amazon and Google. Clearly, Google is still the primary search engine for sure. But what's very interesting is that most people are going to Amazon to do direct product searches, and Amazon is winning the battle when it comes to product searches and actually product purchases. People tend to end up and complete their purchase journey on Amazon versus Google. Google is addressing this and doing a lot with Google Shopping to increase the awareness of products and services and to become much more the go-to place for product searches. But it's an interesting dichotomy that Amazon is winning that battle right now, and Google is on catch up really. But I think we know the size of both of those companies, so it'll be interesting to see what happens with voice search, which I know Jim is going to talk a little bit about as we go through this presentation. So here are the things that we look at when we're sitting down consulting with our customers, because every customer is different. Every retailer has a different set of objectives that they want to achieve through sales channels. It's not always about sales either. It's often about brand positioning. It's often about driving in-store sales versus online sales, depending on the type of brand that we're or retailer that we're talking about. So I think it's a key consideration is when you are going on marketplaces, are you going to control, or are you going to let Amazon or some of these marketplaces control how your brand is sold on those places? And a lot of our brands and retailers have resellers selling directly on those marketplaces, which is it depends on what your objective is, but certainly a lot of the bigger brands will be trying to control that a lot more now and pull back on that. One of the brands we're dealing with is a major. They have about 12 major brands all over the world, and they're starting to pull back all their resellers and their franchisees from allowing them to sell on marketplaces, because a lot of the pricing is starting to be hemorrhaged. It's affecting their core pricing. It's affecting their brand equity and their brand positioning. They would have been known as premium, and by hemorrhaging pricing through marketplaces, it's affecting their core pricing through their primary sales channels. So it's very interesting. I think it's something that needs a lot of thought before you start to jump into marketplaces. How is your brand going to be positioned? Are you going to control sales through those channels, or are you going to let a reseller, franchisee, or wholesaler do that. Um, and a lot of the brands that we're working with and retailers are considering, how do I compete, right, with Amazon? I mean, clearly their logistics are phenomenal, and you're not going to compete with that. So it's got to come down to the position of your brand, the customer experience, loyalty, packaging, and many other considerations um, to differentiate your direct-to-consumer proposition from the experience on marketplaces. Just looking at some of the logistics statistics, it's kind of crazy. I mean, Amazon shipped over 5 billion items to Prime subscribers. I think that the fastest delivery was 8 minutes. And they're doing this in London now as well, where if you're in the London borough, you can get it delivered, I think, within an hour is their guarantee. I'm not sure how it changes all the time with Amazon Prime, but you know, they feel that it's customers' expectations that's driving that. But is that experience good for the customer? Yes, it's great from a logistics point of view, but there's a lot of studies to say that actually what some customers want is that brand experience, the nice packaging, the customer loyalty, the exclusives you know, for example, if you're launching a fashion season, having that available just through your eShop for a period of time, and just having online exclusives through your own direct to consumer experience can help differentiate that, plus packaging and many other things. And so that's what we found with some of our brands and retailers. They've been looking much more at, you know, I cannot compete with the logistics options that Amazon offer. It's nigh on impossible. So what are the other things that we can do as a brand to build our brand, to build loyalty, to give exclusives to our customers directly, to create an experience through logistics that differentiates the experience from Amazon, through packaging, through loyalty, through online exclusives, to time gaps on seasonal launches, etc., etc. So I think there's a lot of things there that can help. It's not all doom and gloom, for sure. There's many options that brands are employing to build that loyalty and to build that direct-to-consumer experience, which differentiates the Amazon experience or the marketplace experience. And again, these will be the key things that, from when you know, I think retailers should consider when they're looking at marketplaces versus their eShop. How is me selling on Amazon or eBay or category-driven marketplaces going to affect my pricing through my eShop? How is it going to affect the margin of my product? Because we know that it is a race to the bottom often on eBay and Amazon. So what's the best way of me maximizing my stock value by using that sales channel perhaps in a different way than I would use it through my eShop? And here's just a kind of brain dump as well on kind of some of the things that we're seeing people doing. Certainly when some maybe small to medium size to large size retailers are looking at starting small on marketplaces and building that. Category driven, as I mentioned, can be a very good entry level way of understanding the do's and don'ts of marketplaces and kind of dipping your toes in the water. A lot of brands as well don't realize, I guess, the KPIs that have to be managed when you are on somewhere like eBay. You know, making sure that you fulfill the orders within a period, making sure they're shipped, making sure the customer experience is to the right level that they expect it to be, or you're penalized and can be decategorized from these marketplaces. So I think it's something you need to think about in terms of the internal team structure to support opening up a sales channel like marketplaces before rushing into it. I think it's very important to look at the life cycle of your product and look at the margin at the start and end of seasons. For example, there's very different pricing that can apply. And clearly you're going to be giving away anywhere from 10 to 20% of your margin to certainly the pure play marketplaces. And so some products and some margins for some business just can't sustain that. So it may not make any sense at all. And certainly where it does make sense, how can you differentiate the experience on your eShop and if you're going to be charging more through your eShop versus on Amazon or eBay or category driven marketplaces. And we all know the key areas to focus on are the experience, the content, the story, packaging, incorporating loyalty as part of online exclusives, time gaps for season launches, only making certain products available, or only certain set of products will only be available on your eShop versus what's available on marketplaces. Getting rid of stock at a certain point so that you don't have a whole load of stock at the end of the season. And at the end of the season, that's costing you money sitting in your warehouse. And so it can often be a great way to stockpile and to clear stock as well. So many different applications of the use of sales channels like marketplaces. One example of that was a customer we worked with was Diadora, which is kind of major manufacturer of trainers. And, they had a similar kind of challenge in that they've huge amount of different types of sizes, colors, and stock that was being piled up at the end of the last season, and it was tying up cash flow to reinvest in the purchase of new stock for the new season. Plus, obviously, we're aware of the costs associated with storing that stock and the distribution of that stock. And so what we did there was we opened up through the Kooomo platform. We were already managing their eShop, so we already had the products listed within Kooomo. So we relisted those products in 14 countries through the Kooomo platform on eBay and Amazon. And we opened, I think, nearly all of those within 2 weeks. So it can be quite fast, and it can be a very straightforward process. Once you have your products up on a platform like Kooomo, then as we're, I think, one of the only ones to actually directly connect those sales channels within the platform. So you have one order management system, and you can see the orders coming from eBay and Amazon, from your retail store, or from your eShop, as an example. So it's a great way of that was a great example of using marketplaces for stockpiling, getting rid of stock to reinvest in new stock for the next season in a very fast period across the whole world. And when we looked at the numbers, they had about 85% increase in revenues year on year from the previous year. And that's just the example of the Diadora shop that we manage on eBay. China. So as I mentioned, we've partnered with Jetstream International and he has about 15, 20 years experience of working in the Chinese marketplace. As mentioned earlier, it's very interesting to note that most of the transactions are happening, 90% in fact of transactions all happen through marketplaces. Nearly half of the 1.4 billion population are active internet users, so it's a huge penetration. Sales in China hit over 366 billion in 2016, so phenomenal scale. Combining the US and UK sales, it was still about the same as those combined. So it shows you the absolute opportunity that exists there if you can tap into that market. And actually, $25 billion of that were made on Singles Day. Which is nearly double, or well, nearly 40% increase on 2016.
So Stephen asks, Kieran, if we set up numerous country eBay accounts, are there different laws or consumer rights or product specifications for eBay USA versus eBay France, for example?
Yes, there are actually. And so what we typically do is there is a harmonization of VAT rates, and that's due to happen across Europe, as I'm sure most people know. But certainly within the platform, we cater for that. And actually, in some cases, we're actually doing the invoicing directly for some of our customers and managing that service for them. But there are considerations. Most of now they're changing it, but mostly you can, if you have adhere broadly to the e-commerce terms and conditions across the major EU5, you can't really get into a lot of trouble because most of that applies. There are specifics, for example, in Germany, There are specifics around logistics and returns. But it's a costly exercise for smaller brands to have to invest in having lawyers to have terms and conditions for every single country. And so once you adhere to the broad set of terms that are dictated by the EU for consumer law, then you're reasonably covered across Europe.
That's great. And a second question, what are the real benefits of using a Prime-like service to a retailer?
Yeah, I mean, Prime obviously has a huge advantage in terms of the opportunities that it brings where retailers can't compete and want Amazon to do the job for them, right? So if I don't have the resources, if I can't compete at that level, Prime offers a whole load of services, tools and services. But there's pros and cons of that when you look at the margin of the product and the percentage that they take for Prime versus you managing it yourself. So, I'm not an expert on Prime, so I'm not going to. That's as much as I can kind of comment on.
That's fair enough. Just one more question at this point.
Yeah.
How does Kooomo integrate with shopping cart systems such as WooCommerce, Magento, Shopify, etc.?
Yeah, clearly we have our own shopping cart system, and we do one-page checkout. We connect with all of the major payment gateways at our one-page checkout, and so we have our own shopping cart. We can integrate with third-party shopping carts, but we typically don't have to do that because the platform performs all those functions. And so you don't need to have to license any third-party shopping cart because it's included in the platform.
That makes sense. We have more questions coming in, Karen. I think maybe we should consider that Jim's lost the audio. Do you want to continue with the main presentation, or would you like to take some more questions in the meantime?
Well, I'd say it's probably useful for people to just see that the rest of this presentation for China, because I think so. I'll try and go through it as fast as I can, and then leave more time for questions, if that makes sense.
That makes a lot of sense. I'll put
Great.
myself on mute.
Fantastic. So look, guys, I mean, going back to the main presentation around China, what's clear here is that the pure play marketplaces, which include, Tmall, JD, .com, VIP, and Koala.com, excuse me, have a lot of market share. But given that there's a massive audience in China, I think it's very, very worth considering all the other cross-border sales in China through category-driven marketplaces as well. And if I go to the next slide. And look at kind of how can you take your products and sell them in the Chinese marketplaces. There are some very big considerations, such as cultural fit. So one of the brands we're working with has children's clothing and women's fashion, and they want to try and take advantage of that huge audience in the Chinese market. But there are things such as colors, size, fit, and cultural fit that need to be considered when you're doing cross-border trade into the Asian marketplace, into China. Whether you decide to do a domestic.com order and then build your sales up in China until you get to a sustainable level where then you decide to have a warehouse in that market. All those kind of things are considerations, whether you decide domestic versus international. And so that's a key consideration when you're looking at your product. I know some of the top 20 retailers in the UK, what they're doing is actually testing the cultural brand fit with their products, with certain product sets in the category-driven marketplaces first, to better understand what are the top sellers, what should we be stocking in those markets, what's the appetite, how do we, looking at the data and analytics to dice up that data to ensure that the right products are being shipped as a domestic.com order. for cross-border trade. So I think there are many things that you need to look at when you're looking at China, and brand position and cultural fit, domestic.com order, so literally shipping from Heathrow to that market, or cross-border through the US. They're key considerations. And just looking at what's happening with marketplaces and what's changing and what are the key considerations that we need to think about. And one of those is voice search. And I'm sure you all have kind of heard the rise of voice search, and particularly with Amazon Alexa, which has been the most successful of them all. It's kind of scary, actually. I actually have the Echo Dot myself at home, but it's kind of scary because you kind of wonder, are they listening to everything that I say, or is it really only when I mention Alexa that it's listening to what I'm saying? So, but this is the world that we're living in, right? So, and how is that impacting sales? Significantly, I would say, and it will continue to, given the experience is so easy. Customers, as I'm sure you know, can be quite apathetic when it comes to demanding service, whether it's from logistics or just integrating all of their services into one easy to manage and order system. So if I just go Amazon Alexa, order me, I don't know, order me an Echo Dot, within 24 hours, that'll be there. It has my credit card information, it has my address details, and it'll actually start recommending other products. So it's phenomenal, really, how simple and easy it is now. When you look at where Siri came from, and then Amazon Alexa, to the Echo Dot product, which facilitates home automation and online sales. And just kind of summarizing back again to the key points, I think these are things that if I was sitting down and looking at, extending my sales channels for my products, what are and looking at marketplaces as another sales channel outside of my eShop, outside of my retail stores, outside of Google Shopping, what do I need to consider here? And I think this is a good checklist to kind of look at. How am I going to position my brand? What's the consumer experience versus the customer experience versus my eShop? How can I use price elasticity tools to ensure I'm not hemorrhaging my core pricing through my eShop versus through marketplaces? Am I sufficiently ready to manage the KPIs that eBay and Amazon dictate to me for selling products through their channels? And is there enough margin in this to make sense, given the margin they take, given the resource required to run it, and given the products and services that I sell? And again, looking at how do I maximize the stock value in the product life cycle for sales, and using marketplaces as a channel for that. So I hope that's been useful. It's difficult to try and get it all across in the period of time that we have, but I hope it's useful in both looking at category-driven marketplaces and pure play marketplaces, and the vast opportunity that exists when considering extending your international reach into markets like China.
That's great. Thank you very much, Kieran. I think that was an interesting and detailed presentation, an introduction to a lot of the issues around marketplaces. I think we have probably lost Jim. I'm not quite sure what went on, but apologies to our listeners who have missed out on that. We've got lots of questions though, so should we maybe move on to those?
Sure.
So next question is, how do I manage marketplaces and my eShop? Do I need two different systems or platforms?
No, that's a good question. Actually, the Kooomo platform actually allows you to manage all sales channels because it's one in the cloud. So it allows you to manage omni-channel, whether it's your retail store, through marketplaces, or through your eShop. All the sales channels are managed through one order management system, one warehouse management system to the Kooomo platform. So you don't have to license different technologies to be able to extend into different sales channels. the sales channels should all be managed through one system, and being in the cloud is one of the advantages of choosing a system like Kooomo, I guess.
That's great. And next question, how long does it take to launch on Kooomo, eShop and marketplaces? Is there some time involved?
Yeah, I mean, it depends. I mean, if you're an existing customer who already has an e-shop through Kooomo, then it's, as I'm sure you've seen from the Diadora example, we actually launched in 14 markets in 2 weeks on eBay and Amazon because all the product information was already there. It was pretty easy to list. So from scratch, we have brands that we signed, actually two or three brands, recent ones like Butler's Chocolates, that took, I think, 3 months to get from start to launch, 3 to 4 months. So it can be anywhere from 6 weeks, which is probably the quickest that you could do, to 6 months, depending on the complexity of the interoperability with some customer systems, because often customers want to integrate with their ERP, they want to integrate it to their POS system. So, but a pretty straightforward implementation can be 6 weeks to 3 months.
That's great. Next question. What do you say to retailers who think going on marketplaces will cannibalize revenue from their websites?
Yeah, I mean, hopefully I tried to address a bit of that in the presentation. I think it can, absolutely. It can cannibalize? I think you've got to be clever the way you use marketplaces. So one option, as I discussed, was, having your eShop as your primary sales channel and direct-to-consumer sales channel, and running only online exclusives through your eShop. And for example, if you take a fashion brand, if you're launching a spring season, a lot of brands that and retailers that we work with would actually hold off launching on eBay and Amazon and only launch through the eShop or other primary sales channels. And then as the season kind of gets into mid-season, they start to open up marketplaces, because it is a discounted pricing structure, and you don't want to hemorrhage your core pricing on your eShop. So that's one way of doing it. Other retailers have considered doing it through franchisees and resellers, so that it's not perceived to be direct from brand. I'm not sure that works. When you look at price elasticity, it can affect sales, in our experience. And I personally feel it's better to control that direct-to-consumer experience and that brand experience with your consumer, than having a reseller who, often ends up discounting probably more than they're necessarily allowed to as well. And that's certainly been the experience of some of our retailers. So I hope that helps answer the question.
I think it does. Another question. Do you think marketplace has increased benefits over drop shipping? And if so, why?
Um, I think both offer. At the end of the day, it comes down to consumer choice, right? It comes down to where the consumer is purchasing and the options that the consumer wants, and the customer journey. Ultimately, customers want choice. They want to be the flexibility to be able to buy through Amazon and eBay. They want to be able to take advantage of drop shipping. They want fast logistics. They want the best price. So it's quite a competitive, demanding, and challenging environment, I feel, out there for retailers and brands. And I think some of those tips should help cater for whether you do or don't decide to use, whether it's drop shipping or marketplaces. Ultimately, it comes down to, what are the risks associated with increased sales? You may, add another million sales by adding marketplaces, but are you dropping your core sales by, I don't know, $5 or £5 on your eShop, which ultimately results in no real net gain? But certainly the retailers that I'm working with have seen huge gain, but they have seen a reduction in AOV on their eShop. So there is a balancing act. I don't think there's any clear-cut answer there. I think the choice needs to be there for the customer, to offer those options. if the margin of the products can sustain those options for the customer, and if you're clever about the way that you create that experience across all sales channels and harmonize those sales channels.
That's great. The next question is potentially a slightly technical question. If it's one you'd rather follow up on offline, then just let us know. But how does Kooomo integrate with WordPress?
So, we have a CMS system within Kooomo that allows you to fully manage the look and feel of your eShop. So we do have our own CMS within the Kooomo platform, which we have many agencies trained on who are using the CMS to create that experience. If you need to use WordPress, we are a plug and play platform. So we're an open platform. We don't restrict customers. There is a standard that you have to adhere to within our platform to commit those CMS changes. But I'm not the technical person, I'll be honest with you. So probably best to get our front end guys, our head of front end, to take that question and come back with a detailed answer. We're happy to do that.
That makes sense, and we will put you in touch offline afterwards.
Great.
Question about warehouse management from somebody who needs the ability to barcode scan items in and out of their warehouse.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, within the Kooomo platform, there's a warehouse management system that supports that. So it connects the warehouse management system and the order system or the management system to get together, and so it supports barcoding, it supports lot management as well for warehouses. So it's a fully integrated system. If you are using a third-party warehouse management system, then we have integrated many other warehouse management systems into the Kooomo platform to connect that with our own order management system. So that is possible, and we're very open to that.
That's great. This next question possibly covers some of the same ground, but if there's something that you can add in the answer to this one, then maybe that would be great. So Kooomo provides eShop management and OMS functionalities. Does Kooomo have experience running in conjunction with the brand's own OMS and eShop in an integrated fashion? And is there a benefit for brands like that? And there's
Yeah, sure. I'm just going to actually go back to a slide because it might be useful to put it up. So I'm just going to put this slide up as a reference, right?
Great.
So people can see. So yeah. I mean, it comes down to the pros and cons and benefits of the order management system that you're using versus the order management system that we have. Clearly, from our point of view, we've been doing this for 17 years, so the order management system is very feature rich and provides full integration with all the other modules that you'll see that are listed on that slide. And so it makes it much more seamless when you're using our order management system. In terms of pricing and costs and affordability, kind of our whole modus operandi is to provide an affordable option for customers so that we're not charging on a per module basis. So once you get the Kooomo platform, you get access to each and all of these modules that are currently up on screen. So then it's down to your preference. Do you prefer to use your own WMS that you're currently working with or your own OMS and plug and play that into the Kooomo platform as an integration? And that will come down to your specific business and whether specific needs that the order management system is fulfilling for you now versus what the system that we have. We also import and export historical orders into our system, so that you can still track and have the reporting on reporting history and analytics on histories of orders as well.
That's great. Question now about multiple warehouses. So I've got 3 warehouses. Can you link them all?
Yes, actually, and that's very typical of our customers. So actually, one of the features we introduced about, what was it, last year, was what we call distributed order management. So what that means is you can actually prioritize if you have multiple warehouses. For example, if you're implementing an omni-channel project, which is using stock that's in store as well as in your warehouses, that can end up being 300 or 400 warehouses, right? Because each store is ultimately a warehouse, right? Because they hold stock. And so within the system, we have a distributed order management tool which allows you to prioritize um, the warehouses by cost efficiency, by product, by many different categories, which means that you can distribute the orders, and in fact, you can deliver orders from multiple warehouses for one order, which makes it very seamless. So it's part of the bread and butter of what we do is integrating many, many different warehouses into the system. It's a pretty straightforward thing to do.
That's great. So thanks for your single-handed managing of this webinar, then, Kieran. Still got some more
Apologies.
questions.
Okay.
It's a good chance to answer all these questions that are coming in there. How do you handle different currencies?
Yes, great question. So, I mean, one of the limitations of some of the systems that are out there is managing international VAT rates, currencies, and tax zones, right? And so, I guess we're a European company. Our DNA has been European. We were originally founded in Italy and now headquartered in Dublin. So it's part of the platform's kind of DNA that we've had to manage multiple currencies, multiple VAT zones, multiple tax rates, and multiple languages. So, yeah, that's absolutely part of what we do. And I know there are limitations with other platforms out there, but that's just part of what we've had to do over the last number of years. It's inherent to what we offer in the platform. If you take a good example of one of our customers, Havaianas in Europe, they're operating in 26 different countries across Europe, with the complexity, all that complexity of VAT, currencies, language, geolocalization of geo-targeting of products, of pricing. So all of that is catered for within the platform.
That's great. Then, what tips do you have to managing a successful product or range on Amazon Marketplace so that you can maintain your advantage? Any advice there?
Uh, Pretty big question. So, I mean, I think I've talked, hopefully, I've given some sense of the key considerations. And I'm not going to profess to kind of every brand is different and every brand has a different, way of looking at this, whether you're, a fast fashion brand, for example, versus a premium brand. It's a very different approach that you would take to marketplaces. But I think if you go back to these considerations and look at those considerations and kind of do a tick box and checking exercise around your eShop and your primary sales channels versus selling on marketplaces. The question was around Amazon, which is a pure play marketplace, and looking at these 5 areas, and these are only 5 of the areas to consider. But I think if you look at those and put them as a checklist against what you're going to do on Amazon, it's a very good exercise to consider. And I think it's also very useful to look at how far are you prepared to go when it comes to pricing, when it comes to discounted pricing for your brand or your products on Amazon. And I think it's very important you determine that before you go on there, because I've had some retailers who've been hugely successful very quickly within a period of weeks on Amazon. But the downside is that they actually, their margin, where their traditional margin would be 20 to 30%, has ended up more like 5 to 6%. But operationally, they still had to do quite a lot, unless they decided on the prime option, for example.
That's great. And a possibly timely question here from somebody who says, can you maybe tell us a little bit more about Jetstream? What are the services that they offer?
Yes. So the reason we decided to partner with Jetstream was we had a number of customers who wanted to take their products and take them into marketplaces in Asia. And so why we partnered with Jim was because he's been operating in that marketplace for 15 to 20 years. He understands inside and out all of the different types of marketplaces, the cost of entry, the pricing, the cultural considerations, and what Jetstream offer is the full management of that. So everything from listing to customer service to managing the orders to advising on fulfillment and logistics. So it's really a kind of a managed service, I guess, for China. So I have my products, I'm selling them in the UK, I need to take them to China. Jetstream, can you do everything for me? And that's kind of what they do. Or they will tailor the package. They use the Kooomo platform as the central system to manage all those sales channels. And Jim would be the interface between the Chinese marketplaces and the retailer or brand. But literally, he would do pretty much everything that is required to start selling.
That's great. And as we're coming up towards the end of our time now, just one more question for you.
Sure.
Can you handle eBay tickets in your system?
Yes, we can. So we have our own ticketing system, and the eBay tickets, as it's kind of a bit of custom work, but the eBay tickets can be migrated and pulled into our system.
That's great. Well, as I said, we've had a lot of questions there. We've managed to answer them all, which is great.
Fantastic.
So, Kieran, I'd like to thank you for a valiant webinar and a very interesting presentation as well. So thanks for being with us today, Kieran, and apologies to Jim for the audio problems that he's had today.
No problem at all. Thank you all for your time, and I hope you found it useful. And we're very happy to take further questions if you just send us an email to sales@kooomo.com. We'll happily take any further questions that you have, or just go to our website.
That's great. And as I mentioned at the beginning, we'll be following up with by email with the link to the on-demand webinar, so you can listen again to it at your convenience. So thank you all once again for taking part in this webcast, and goodbye.
Goodbye.